The Nelli Stevenson Show is recorded on Wurundjeri country. Friends, I have been so excited for our next guest to come on the show. He is the closest thing I have ever met to a living Steve Irwin. He is a true blue Aussie legend, all-round nature lover and nature educator, and he specialises in pollinators. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Clancy Lester to the show. Clancy, thanks for coming on.
No worries. Thanks so much for having me, Nelly. I'm absolutely pumped. Have a good chat.
It's just a joy to have you. So for those of us who aren't necessarily familiar with your story and your upbringing, who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? And what do you love most about it?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small country town of a few thousand people in Numurkah in northeast Victoria. And yeah, I grew up obsessed with nature, obsessed with, Steve Irwin and David Attenborough, and have, just followed those dreams and passions to educate and advocate for the environment and nature.
So your love for native bees started with researching stingless bees in Arnhem Land with the Yolngu people. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I was super lucky to do a master's research project up in, northeast Arnhem Land, right up at the top of the Northern Territory. And I just learnt so much about, the connection to country and the importance of native bees in the ecosystem and just how awesome they are. And it's just got me absolutely obsessed with native bees, with Indigenous culture and everything in between.
What's the coolest thing about native bees?
Well, I think the fact that there's just so many different types, like there's over 2,000 types of native bees or species in Australia. And, for every flower that you look at, there's probably a native bee or pollinator that's like specialized just for that one. And that's why I find biodiversity so incredible.
So how does that work? There's a flower and a bee especially for that flower?
Yeah, a lot of the times, like especially over the millions of years that there's been for these adaptations and evolution to occur, there's some really, really interesting, like specialized behaviors and adaptations that you see in the pollinator world. Like for instance, there's a Euhesma species of bee, which is only a few millimeters long, and it's over time managed to start to collect nectar from things that are traditionally pollinated by birds, like the one-sided bottlebrush. And so its like mouth parts that it extracts the nectar from are longer than its whole body because it needs to make up for being a small little bee.
My gosh, that's so cool. And like, what do you think is the most fascinating combination of bee and flower that we have here?
Or there's species of orchids. This might be cheating if it's not particularly bees, but wasps are also pollinators. And there's species of orchids that trick male wasps into thinking that they're getting laid and mating with a flower, and that's how the flower gets pollinated, thanks to these male wasps. And either the actual flower itself looks like a female wasp, and some of them even smell like a female wasp.
Where'd they get the yams? What's the yams? Oh my God, that's hilarious. I can't believe that. So the wasp thinks it's getting a root.
Yes, literally. And
then it goes off and thinks it's getting a root with another flower.
Yeah, and it's pollinating these rare orchids.
How good is nature? Oh my God. And so something I really wanted to talk to you about, because I feel a bit funny about insects, right? And not for reasons that you'd think. I mean, I have seen pictures of you with like cave spiders crawling across your face, which makes me want to just hurl my breakfast back up again. But when I see insects, sometimes it really unearths my eco-anxiety, particularly things like butterflies, because I see a beautiful butterfly and I think, oh, gee, I haven't seen one of you in a while. And that can sometimes send me into a bit of a spiral. And something I'm really curious to learn about from you as, someone who is so passionate about climate change is, Australians understand climate at a high level, that it causes more droughts, bushfires and floods. What are we not seeing? What is happening to those delicate sort of little ecosystems and small things beneath our feet that we really should pay more attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. So like we were talking about before, about how there's these special relationships between pollinators and flowers, or between animals and plants. When you have these tiny little shifts in an ecosystem, it can have such a drastic change. Because if you have a specialist pollinator, like that wasp that gets tricked into thinking it's getting laid and it's pollinating the flower, if the temperatures are warmer, like so if the seasons are sort of like shifting a little, they're a little bit out of whack, that flower might flower a few weeks earlier or a month earlier. And then when that wasp emerges, it's looking for, those females, or it's looking for that flower but that flower might have already come and gone. So then when you have these specialist relationships that get wrecked or, shifted by changes to the climate, that can, end a whole species.
I hate that idea that there's a little bee out there looking for its flower and its flower is already gone.
That's something that's very well and truly playing out as we speak, as the warmer weather from climate change or these, extreme weather events that are, triggering different environmental phenomena that there might be species of bees looking for the flowers that have already finished flowering.
And I understand that, bees are really, really crucial and pollinators are really crucial in like agricultural level food production. But like, what are the sort of upstream impacts that we could expect to see from something like a specific pollinator losing its specific flower? What are the sort of cascading impacts that we might see from that?
Well, when you have those mutualisms where, that flower might depend on that special pollinator that is fully disrupted, or you might have, just the overall abundance of things. Like we see this in, eucalyptus when all of the gum trees are flowering at the same time. And it's like a mass abundance event of like just a celebration for pollinators. If the eucalyptus, thanks to climate change, they might be, flowering earlier, flowering later, then there might be less insects around when the birds are meant to be nesting or, they're meant to be collecting insects to feed their babies. So you see these things like cascading along the food chain. It starts the flower, then it impacts the insects, then it impacts, the frogs and lizards and birds that are feeding on those insects. Then it affects the predators of those frogs and lizards and birds. And then it just goes all the way and then it does like a full loop. So there's these tiny little like disruptions to an ecosystem can filter all the way along.
Gee, it's incredible, because as I'm sure you know, Australia is world champion of extinctions. It's right up there for deforestation as well. But do you think that our elected representatives are aware enough of this?
Absolutely not. No, not for a second. I think that especially inside where the decisions are getting made, there's very, very little environmental representation. We've seen this in the recent budget, 9% overall decrease in funding towards, on the ground biodiversity and nature-based funding. And, our very environment minister, Murray Watt, the whole report when it came out, everything he spoke about was about speeding up the approvals for development and housing. And he never actually touched on any sort of thing around the environment. It was all about, regulatory reform and housing development that was, grouped in with the environmental part of the budget. So it is really concerning.
And that's so insane to me because at least Tanya Plibersek took photos with koalas and stuff, right? Like at least she was approving all these horrendous coal and gas extensions, but she was still pretending to, like be really there loving those animals and stuff. I mean, what do you think it says about the state of our politics when our Minister for the Environment is more focused on cutting green tape and speeding up approvals than he is with the extinction crisis that we're in right now?
Well, I think it can be a reflection on what the public perception is because, like what you put out the other day around the major concerns of the everyday Australian at the moment, and the environment I'm not sure if it was in the top 10 of the average person.
It's number 7 or 8.
Yeah, it's way down. So we're very concerned about the cost of living, very concerned about, housing affordability, all these sorts of things. So you can understand why it's not an immediate issue to some people. But the environment is something that impacts everything. If we don't have, clean rivers, if we don't have clean air to breathe, if we don't have healthy soils for agriculture, it's impacting our food security, it's impacting our health system, it's going across the board. So it might not even be something that you immediately think about, but across the board, it is so, so important that we do protect all aspects of the environment and nature.
So speaking of politics, I mean, we're in a pretty alarming state right now with the rise of One Nation. As someone who specialises in pollinators and the environment, what alarms you most about that?
What alarms me the most is the policies of One Nation is not particularly suited towards the environment or Indigenous rights. And they're two things that go hand in hand in having a healthy country and having healthy people. And that's what really concerns me. The election was won on climate action, and we haven't seen that. And the fact that this rise in One Nation will not be a better solution for the environment or for climate action. It'll more than likely be a lot worse. So that's what really does concern me.
Yeah, you mentioned Indigenous rights there, and it's a big part of your public identity that you're a big fan of Indigenous knowledge and seasons and like fully acknowledging that we're a bunch of tidy-whities from Victoria here. But what do you wish that other white folks better understood or appreciated about First Nations knowledge and customs?
It's just everything. Like you just said, there's so many different aspects, whether it's the connection to country, whether it's the knowledge of the seasons and the weather, whether it's the incredible knowledge around like the plants and animals and the way that everything interacts, or just being able to care for not only what's currently available, but also caring for future generations and as well. And that's really not what we see in modern society at the moment.
Where do you think folks should start on their journey? What's a good first step and then a good next step for people who want to be better educated about this?
Definitely learning, whose Aboriginal land you're on for starters, and seeing if there's resources from your local RAP, and just trying to, absolutely immerse yourself. And then also like going back to the roots and learning about, Australia's history, because that's often something that the everyday Aussie doesn't know much about. There's so much of our history that we're not taught, and that goes a long way in understanding why so many of these issues are so prevalent in modern society. The fact that we're not aware of the intergenerational trauma and a lot of these things which have such deep impacts, and that's definitely something that we need to get our heads around so that we can acknowledge that, and then we can move forward and walk together afterwards. I was also very lucky to go to a school where we had a year, because in year 9, the year that just sort of doesn't count at high school, because that's when people are going feral and hitting puberty. And so like at my school, year 9, there's sort of a write-off, and one of the things that they do through the year is like an Indigenous immersion, where all the students can go away for 1 or 2 weeks to go and live in an Indigenous community or volunteer at an Indigenous school. So I was very lucky in that regard, that I had an opportunity to really see firsthand and learned and have a lived experience. But like my whole schooling, like I remember, learning Japanese and Italian and French, and I learned about the pyramids. Like I remember all this history I learned, and it's really not the same degree of what I learned about Indigenous culture. So it's definitely something that was touched on, but I can still recall so much of this foreign history that I learned, and not so much about Australia.
Considering you are a pretty, straight down the line, ridgy-diggy, true blue Aussie bloke, and, you can be read that way, what do you think more Aussie blokes need to be aware of considering this rise of the far right?
I think that they just need to be aware of more than what they read in a Facebook article or headline, and actually go on to, how they vote and see what One Nation is actually supporting. Because like what we see so many of the comments that pop up, or so many things that pop up, it's like, Pauline speaks for the people, or she's not afraid to speak her mind, or, she's for us, she's for the Aussie battler. I'm like, do these people not see that she's literally has not attended Parliament for more than half of her paid responsive duties to be at Senate inquiries and voting in the Senate? She's not even there half the time, because she's having lunches with mining magnates and foreign multinational conglomerates. Like she's not for the Aussie battler. She spends all of her time with billionaires. I'm not sure if the typical Aussie that thinks that she's going to speak for them is seeing this, or like isn't aware, or I don't get this, because she's clearly not for the everyday Aussie. She's definitely feeding into the lies and into the hands of billionaires.
Absolutely. And I mean, when you look at her voting record, you can go to places like theyvoteforyou.org.au and you can see what she has actually voted on throughout her parliamentary career. And it's things like reducing women's rights, winding back bodily autonomy, reducing workers' rights, cutting paid parental leave, all of these sorts of things that make the everyday Aussie's life worse. And I guess what I would love to know is, what are your thoughts on what Labor needs to do? What does Labor need to do between now and the election to win people back?
I think maybe it's what Labor should not be doing, like approving fossil fuel projects. That we've seen nearly 40 in the current term that have been approved. And then also data centers is another one. We should not be approving data centers at any point. How are we going to be reaching these net zero goals by 2050? And then free public transport is always good for the public, and actually finding ways to benefit the everyday Aussie.
And maybe like not doing things like privatizing our ticketing system in the first place. Like I remember when they brought in a privatized ticketing system, I was like, what is wrong with the Met card? Why do we need a corporate ticketing system with Mikey? This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. And then you get these pieces of plastic that expire. That was the craziest thing for me. It was like I tried to tap on and it was like, oh no, your Mikey has expired. And I'm like, it's a piece of plastic that expires. What is the purpose of it expiring? So I pay another $6 to get another Mikey. Like it blows my mind. And so thinking about Mikeys in Victoria, what is happening right now in Victoria that is the most concerning to you at a local level?
I would say the most concerning thing that's happening in Victoria is these data centers popping up all over the place. And the fact that they're managing to even skip the public consultation level, which is, for development and these sorts of things that's going to be impacting local people. So like I lived in Port Melbourne, for example, and 3 new data centers popped up, and there was never even any chance to give any feedback or to, there was no public consultation done. They just streamlined the approval of these places. And what makes it worse is they're surrounded by Westgate Park, which is one of the few awesome nature reserves, in an urban environment. And it's just going to be, littered now with data centers that are going to be producing noise and sound and all sorts of pollution.
Tell our listeners about Westgate Park. What do you love about it?
It's well, what I really love about it is the fact that it was originally like a dumping ground, and through decades and decades of volunteers planting trees and plants and cleaning it up, turned it into this like nature oasis. And there's so many species of birds and native plants, all sorts of things in between. And it's within 10 minutes of the CBD. It is really awesome, and I spend heaps of time there. I'm a massive, massive fan of it.
Something that I have always been a big fan of is the idea that action is the antidote to despair. So for people like you and me who care heaps about nature, who care about the environment, often we are compelled to do something, to start volunteering, to join local groups. And I have been really inspired lately about your passion for young people and what young people are doing to tackle both the climate and the biodiversity crisis. Tell me about young people.
Well, absolutely. We care the most. We're the ones that are stepping into this future, and we need to be the ones that know about it, and we need to be the ones that are looking after it. And I definitely find that, looking at the numbers of these surveys and reports and research about, youth mental health, it is just on the sharpest decline, and climate anxiety. And there's so many things that are contributing to, such concerning mental health of our young people. And one of the best ways that I find, one of the best solutions is to be out in nature and, going out and planting plants and volunteering and like being part of the change to make the world a better place is one of the best ways to, address the climate anxiety and the feeling of, despair that people are being met with in recent times. When there is like sort of no hope, you're seeing your headlines, you're doom scrolling, you're seeing all the negativity in the world. Sometimes you are the hope, and like the act of doing something and getting out there and making the world a better place is what not only gives you hope, but what is the hope. So that's why I just absolutely advocate for people to go and get involved in these, nature groups and volunteering groups.
And it can be completely life-changing as well. Like I was a fashion photographer that was the first sort of wave of my career. And I was at probably one of the loneliest and saddest points of my life when I heard that Sea Shepherd was based in Melbourne, and I went up and I sort of knocked on the side of one of the ships and was like, hey, I've got some vegan groceries for you guys. You guys are really cool. I could never dream of doing what you did. And then I started volunteering with them. And here I am sort of 12 years later, and I have built a career quite a successful career of being a communications consultant for environmental and climate issues. And so it's like, it not only gets you out of the house, you meet people you like, you meet like-minded people as well. Because like when you're sitting there churning up like I was about the fact that, oh my God, there are whales being harpooned to death in Antarctica every year, pregnant ones so they can double their take. What the actual fuck? And then I meet other people who are also worried about that. I don't know if you've ever seen the film Lady and the Tramp, but there's this scene where they're in the pound and there's this old Russian, like, saggy old Russian dog, and he goes, miserable beings find other miserable beings, then is happy. And it's like, I sort of felt like that when I started volunteering. It was like, I was really miserable. I was so torn up about this issue. And then picking little nurdles and doing beach cleans on Williamstown Beach with other people who were really worried about the same thing as me, like, completely changed my life.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely something in that. Like, you do find your people, and that's also part of it. Like, there was just research that come out the other day about how there was like a survey that was asking people, oh, would you like donate to climate action? And then people were like, yeah, like I'd do that. And it was something like 2/3 of people were willing to, give up something for climate action to, help the environment. And then the next question they asked was, do you think other people are willing to do that? And the results were like so much further negative as to what. So they thought that so much less people out there were also willing to give and help the environment. Something like way less than half is what they thought. But then they actually found out it was more like 2/3 were actually willing. We all think that nobody cares, or we all think we're like just all on our own, but we're actually all in this together. And that's where, like you said, when you find your people and when you come together, you think, oh, we are all in this together, and there's other people out there that want to see better and want to do better.
Absolutely. And that's why, like, the most powerful thing we can do is talk to people about these issues that we care about. We talk to people about climate change. We normalize these conversations because, in my line of work, I'm constantly looking at, polls and pieces of research that show how high concern about the, climate and environment and stuff actually is amongst Australians. Like, yes, cost of living is so prevalent with people that often there's not a lot of space when you say, rank the things you really care about. But if you were to ask people, how concerned are you about climate change or about the extinction crisis, they go, hey, yeah, that's pretty fucked up. Like, yeah, I am concerned about that. But it's only if you ask people, hey, out of this list of 20 things that are terrible in the world right now, what are you most concerned about? That they go, oh, yeah, cost of living, housing, this, that, the climate's down there. And so this is why I think what you do is so great, educating people, inspiring people, spreading the word as such an accessible and, excitable character that does more, it really does more benefit than you think it does from like a statistical level. I can tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need more people out here that are, having these conversations, advocating for nature, for the environment, and yeah, just spreading that awareness of, the cool, awesome stuff there is out in nature to be enjoyed and to be protected.
Yeah. So as a successful environmental and nature communicator, what would your first piece of advice be to someone who doesn't really know where to start?
I think my advice is to just start. But I was speaking to someone the other day who has just started. And we talked, for like at least a year ago, and they're like, I'm thinking of doing this. And so just do it. Like, who actually cares? Like, who genuinely gives a shit whether you start or not? And they're like, yeah, oh yeah. And then, but who cares, whatever. And then a month or two ago, they actually started posting, and then have already like gotten tens of thousands of videos. And then they said to me, they're like, oh, thanks for like encouraging me to start or whatever. I wish I started like when we first spoke. And I go, no, who gives a shit? Like, you've started now. Like that's the main thing. Just getting out there and have a go and just not care.
And it doesn't even have to be as a content creator. It can just literally be with your family. Like, guys, look at this cool stick I found. Like, finding that childlike joy. And I think that's one of the things that I'm noticing as a parent is like how cool the world is if you look at it through a child's eyes of like, oh my God, mummy look at this stick. How cool is this stick? Look at these rocks I found. Like, because nature is so unbelievably cool. And it was like something that I didn't notice. So my husband is a naturalist and a wildlife photographer. And for me, everything was, as the journalist from the Age Bianca Hall has mentioned, an LBB, a little brown bird. Like a lot of people just see all birds as little brown birds, these little LBBs. Everything was a sparrow to me until the first time that my husband went, he's from New Zealand. He went, oh my God, what is this incredible tropical looking parrot thing up there? I was like, oh, it's an eastern rosella. Like, what? It's an eastern rosella. He's like, are you for real? That thing is magical. And I was sort of, and then I went on this journey where he became a twitcher. He got really interested in Australian birds. And now I can look at David Pocock in Senate estimates and be like, hey, that's a spotted partlet on his pin just there. And suddenly there aren't just little brown birds anymore. There are eastern partlets. There's native spotted something or other. There's the superb fairy wren. There's a sublime fairy wren. There are 15 different types of bin chickens out there, and they're all so cool in their own little way. Like, you just have to look. I saw this article come up in The Guardian, and I was really keen to talk to you about it because I just so want your take. Now, the headline is, "They surprise me every time. Bees can use tools to solve problems, study finds." Bumblebees can use tools to solve a problem, according to experiments that demonstrate their remarkably advanced cognitive abilities. The bees were given an adapted version of an experiment that 100 years ago first demonstrated chimpanzees could work out how to retrieve an out-of-reach banana by stacking boxes. Since then, various other primates, elephants and crows have joined an elite cohort of species known to be capable of this level of insight and spontaneous problem solving. In the latest research, bees were shown to be able to roll a polystyrene ball to a specific location and climb on it in order to access an artificial flower on a low ceiling. The findings challenge the long-standing assumption that insects operate purely on instinct and mindless trial and error learning.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Bees using tools! Like, I remember when they found octopuses using tools in aquariums. They were using like a rock to smash open a jar or something. And it was like, oh my God, octopus uses tools. Tell me about the intelligence of bees.
It's actually, what even makes it more impressive is the number of neurons that bees have is only like in the millions. So the cognitive function of their brains, like if we tried to, estimate what it would be, it doesn't make sense that they are able to be this like cognitively intelligent with such a small amount of neurons, because human brains are in the billions and billions of trillions of these neurons, and insects like bees are such a fraction of that, yet they're still able to have this cognitive ability to communicate. There's been studies on like recognizing quantities and even like grasping basic mathematics, and being able to like do the waggle dance using tools now. Like, it's actually super incredible that we can see this in insects.
And tell our listeners about the waggle dance.
Oh, so the waggle dance is something that European honeybees and other bees that live socially can do, where if they find a like stash of flowers, they will have this particular dance they do called the waggle dance, and the intensity that they do, like if they go super crazy, that means like there's hella flowers. And then the amount of laps that they do, because they'll do this in like laps. So they watch the dance and they go, oh, there's hella flowers. And then they watch the dance to see the sort of direction and how far away. And then they'll go off and try and find that pollen signal or that stash of flowers that the bees just come back and collected from.
This little bee flash mob that like, yo, there's hella flowers over here.
Yeah, it's like at a party when there's a dance circle and someone's in the middle, like doing their thing.
Just like breakdancing.
Yeah, so.
You mentioned that European honeybees live socially. Tell me about bees living socially. What does that mean?
So, yeah, we have, like what I was saying earlier, of how we have thousands of species of bees in Australia. Over 2,600 is how many we think there are. We currently know there's about 1,700, but that's only the ones we have names for. So we're still finding more and more. And we think there's, over 2,000 once we find most of them. And only out of all those, only 11 of those actually live socially, like the European honeybee that we, love and always think about. And that's just one type of the way that bees live. And so socially, or eusocial bees, this is when they have a queen and a hive and make honey. And that's like their way of life. And they have workers and drones and nurse bees and all these different types of things in a part of a colony. But then you've also got semi-social bees. So these are bees where sometimes they might like share the same house, and there might be a few of them. This happens in things like carpenter bees because the adults live old enough to see the babies grow up into adults. So sometimes they'll like share the same house that they've built with their babies that have grown up. So they're sort of like semi-social. Then you have communal bees. These are like bees in the inner north of Melbourne. Like they live in like share houses, or they might live in like little towns where,
Vote for the socialists.
yeah, they're called communal. So they're more so solitary. So they'll like build their own house, but they might like live together, or they might have the same entrance but make their own like little apartment or bedrooms inside the house. And then you have things that are fully solitary, just live all by themselves, make their own nests, and don't interact with other bees at all, just live all by themselves and are fully solitary. So you have a whole spectrum of how bees live their lives.
That's so fascinating. And like, so that I guess there's sort of like whales, right? Because there are some whales that live socially, like pilot whales. They live socially, they live in these huge pods. And then you've got other whales that are much more solitary. So I guess this is the thing that people don't really understand about bees or just insects more broadly, is how complex they are. Like to have that level of social complexity. Like you mentioned nurse bees. What is a nurse bee? What does a nurse bee do? What's their role?
They have designated roles within the hives. There's either bees that have to drag out when there's dead or dying or sick bees. They have to clean out the hive. And then there's also bees that are responsible for feeding the babies and raising the next generation. And then there's also bees that are responsible for guarding the nest. So there's all of these different roles that happen within a colony of these social bees. But then like the solitary bees that live by themselves, they're every type of bee. They're just solo baddies that do
Every bee.
everything. Yeah.
Solo baddies. I love it. The little solo baddies. And so what is different about life for a solo baddie? She's the equivalent of that meme that's going around that if women don't lower their standards, they are going to live in their beautiful apartments with their pets. Like, is she the version? Is she like the bee version of that?
Yeah, a bit. The female bees do everything in the insect world, especially the solitary ones. They find the nest, or they dig the nest into the ground. They collect the pollen and nectar. They lay the egg. All they need the males for is sometimes a little bit of protection, but depending on the species. But yeah, mainly just for breeding, just for reproducing. There's
Wow.
not much else that our bees do.
That is unreal. You mentioned wasps earlier. Now, I feel like wasps have a pretty bad rap. What are Australian wasps like? And is that fair that they have that rap?
Oh, it's absolutely not fair that they have that rap. Absolutely not. In Australia, we have thousands of bees. We have tens of thousands of wasps, because like what bees are specialized particular flowers, we have wasps that are specialized to parasitizing particular caterpillars or particular spiders. And there's so much diversity of wasps for the different things they parasitize, for the things that they predate on, for the things that they pollinate as well. So there's such a diversity.
When you say parasitize, it sounds pretty disgusting. What does parasitize mean?
So parasitize is when a wasp will either inject their eggs into something that's living, like a caterpillar, that like slowly will consume them from the inside out, or yeah, they'll like paralyze a spider. So instead of killing it and then it like might break down, they'll just paralyze it so its bodily function continues to go on while the eggs will consume them, like the baby wasp will consume them from the inside out. And
Clancy,
sometimes yeah, hold your stomach. Sometimes the wasp babies have even like sort of evolved to know what parts of the caterpillar, what parts of the prey to eat first, so that they will survive, like the prey will survive longer.
You're not doing a very good job of deleting that bad rap. That's fucking disgusting.
but it's such an
Oh,
important part of biodiversity.
why is that important? Help me understand why that's important, that there are wasps doing hella disgusting things to other insects.
Yeah. So, for instance, people listening might have roses in their garden or might have plants that are prone to getting aphids.
Yeah,
And
fuck aphids. I've got roses. Fuck
yes,
aphids. Man, fuck
and
those insects.
the reason why aphids will take over is because you have no parasitic wasps in your garden. Because if you have parasitic wasps in your garden, if you have ladybugs in your garden, they will keep the numbers of those aphids down.
Can I have the
And so
ladybugs and not the wasps?
you could try,
I'll
but
take the ladybugs.
same goes for if people have like, silver beet or, cabbage or like vegetables that get eaten by caterpillars. That's because you have no parasitic wasps to control the numbers of caterpillars.
Yeah, fuck cabbage moths. Like, they're the only of the little pretty flying butterfly type things that I see in my garden. I'm like, fuck, get away from my silver beet. You stay away from my broccoli and kale.
Yeah,
Fuck
exactly.
off.
So there's a great example in itself as to why you need to have
Okay, so
parasitic
we
wasps.
need the parasitic wasps to stop the cabbage moths and to stop the aphids. All right, I'm sold. I'm sold. Now, Clancy, you are quite infamous for some of your shenanigans. I was trying to find the news article on this shenanigans, and I searched man in Speedos nature strip insect. And this is what Google, you know how Google forces its AI upon you? Speaking of data centers earlier, this is what Google said to me. A man striking poses in a Speedo on a residential nature strip in Victoria can technically do so as long as his genitals are covered and the act is not for a sexual purpose. However, it is generally considered socially inappropriate and could result in legal consequences. So, Clancy, tell us about the time you posed in your Speedos on a nature strip. Why'd you do it? What happened?
Well, I see a nature strip and it frustrates me because I think, why is that not, native flowers? Why have we just got this pointless grass? And I was thinking to myself, or like having a conversation, I'm thinking, why is it actually there? Like, what am I going to do? It's not for recreational sport. I'm not going to, kick a soccer ball on it. It's just a little strip of grass along the roadside. I'm not going to have a picnic on it because, like, there's cars coming. I'm not going to sunbake on it. Like, what is the actual point? And then I was like, actually, how funny would it be if I did each of those things to show people how stupid I look doing it? So I kicked the footy on it, I had a picnic on it, and then I sunbaked in my budgie smugglers on it. and that like, and then it looks so dumb. And it was actually funny when you talk about the legal obligations, because someone actually rang the cops, and a cop car, when I was filming, a cop car pulled up next to me and said, "Mate, what are you actually doing?" And I said, "I'm protesting nature strips." And they're like, "So why are you?" They're like, "Why in your Speedos?" And I was like, "Because, what's the point of this grass here? What am I going to do? Like, sunbake on it?" And they were like, "Yeah, that's dumb." And I'm like, "Exactly. That's the whole point." And they're like, "Good luck with your video." They probably thought of some Fruit Loop, but I'm tipping that the cops probably watched the video because it's got, millions of views.
It's hilarious. And have you seen one of my favorite type of like heartwarming timeline cleansing content at the moment is I follow a bunch of people in America who are skateboarders, rollerbladers, roller skaters, and they get these little like shakers and they'll go like hooning along the road and they shake these native wildflower mixes over these pointless nature strips, and then they document them being sort of rewilded, and they'll specifically time it so they do it before a ton of rain. Imagine if someone shook some native wildflower seeds out before all this free rain. Like, what can we do here in Australia if we are in a position where we can do something about our shitty grass nature strips? Like, what can we do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing you can do is look at what council that you live in, because this is something I don't want to get people into trouble and say, stuff whoever's in charge and go and do whatever. Because sometimes that can do more harm than good. So look up your local council and then look at the local guidelines for nature strip planting. And quite often local councils are really supportive because it's free work for them. They don't have to do the maintenance on mowing the lawns, and it looks better. It's better for cleaner air, biodiversity. There's so many things it's so much better for. So a lot of councils are supportive of it. And then once you see your laws, they might say there's certain height restrictions because sometimes they don't like having tall trees and things next to roads or whatever. So try and follow your guidelines and then go to your local native nursery. Always I'm an advocate for going to local native nurseries and getting Indigenous plants to your local area because they're going to be more suited to your climate, your soils, everything, better for your local biodiversity. And then just, get planting. It's not a whole lot to it, but to do it.
Why not Bunnings? Why not Bunnings, Clancy?
To be fair, there's still a number of like native plants and things you can get from Bunnings. But at the same time, Bunnings will literally sell invasive plants like gazinias and agapanthus that are, registered weeds that are legal for sale in some places.
Nobody should be selling agapanthus. They're the stupidest fucking plant. Like, they're so dumb. It should be illegal to sell them just full stop because they're just a shit plant.
Yes, exactly. We're on the same wavelength here.
So fuck lawns, fuck agapanthus, and fuck Bunnings.
Pretty much. Get to your local native nursery.
All right, Clancy, I got one more study I want to run past you. So in 2019, a research team led by Melbourne University investigated 47 neighbourhoods to determine how much green space was actually just nature strips. 36.7 was just nature strips. What the fuck?
Yep, that's incredible. Like a third.
What are we going to do?
Well,
do we need to all get out in our budgie smugglers?
I think that. Well, read out the legal guidelines of how to do it without getting into trouble. But but the thing for me is that sounds like it's something that's super concerning, right? But there's also an aspect to that is just awesome that's how much potential there is. Because if you can imagine if we had a third of our cities that were planted with native plants, like how incredible that would be for biodiversity. And similar studies or like studies that would tie nicely into this is what they've done around urban biodiversity. And when they've looked at, parks, gardens, nature strips, reserves, all these sorts of things, what they've looked at the most important things for encouraging biodiversity, number one was the amount of native or indigenous plants. So like if you have a biodiversity of plants, you're going to have a biodiversity of animals and pollinators and so biodiversity of plants encourages biodiversity and overall biodiversity of everything else. So that was the most important thing. What they didn't find was that size was not an important thing. So size doesn't matter in this context. And, a small little patch with a heap of different plants, different diversity would be better than a large park with only a few things. So that was two interesting things they found. Another one was connectivity. So if you have a little patch with heaps of biodiversity, and then another little patch with heaps of biodiversity, then another little patch, and all of a sudden you have three that are connected, then that goes a long way in
a wildlife corridor.
Yes. So when you say a third of our city is nature strips, that's a third of the whole city that could be connected with biodiversity plantings. So that's how I like to look at it, the amount of potential that we can see for these initiatives.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. Get some shakers, get some seeds, get your skates on, and let's fix this biodiversity problem we have here in Australia. Clancy Lester, it has been an absolute joy having you on the show today. Thank you so much. Now, where can people find you online?
Searching up, like what you said, Crazy Man in Budgie Smugglers on Nature Strip, or my handle is Bees and Blossoms across pretty much everything.
Thank you so much for coming. It's been a real joy.
No, thanks so much. Appreciate it, Nelly. And I love the work that you do as well. You're doing the stuff behind the scenes. Anything that I've ever worked on, Nelly's probably written the basic structure and strategy for it. So appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Clancy. You have a great day. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to leave a comment, send it to someone hot, and follow us on Instagram. We're at the Nelli Stevenson Show. Have a great one. We'll see you next time.